you. Now, this evening we are going to open the same chapter, that is 2 Corinthians chapter 5. The first point we have taken from the first 9 verses. Why am I excited to be a witness of Jesus Christ? What are the motivations to be a servant of God? That is our subject. In the first 9 verses, we have seen we are excited to be witnesses of Christ because God has given us a body. We are not the owners. We are the stewards of this body. We are not only keeping it for ourselves, but we have to use it for God's glory. Now we go to last portion, the B portion of verse 9. It says like this: we labor, whether we present or absent, we may be accepted of Him. Underline that. We may be accepted of Him. We know that we are accepted of Him from the time we are saved, don't we? So here the reading is that we may be able to please Him. That means a service and a life to God which is pleasing to God. So in some of the version it is written that we may be pleasing to God. So the second thing that I wanted to tell, motivations for our life and witness, is the pleasure of my God. In our life, sometimes we have to be against the social customs, traditions, rituals, all other things. Why? Because we want to please our God. How can we please our God? Whatever things He revealed in the scriptures, when we obey, it pleases God. And we also rejoice when we please Him. But instead of talking that subject in a very lengthy way, only one point I would tell you. There are 2 times heaven was open and a voice was heard from heaven: this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. What were those 2 times? The first time in Matthew chapter 3, when Jesus went down to the river Jordan and He was baptized at the hand of John the Baptist to fulfill all righteousness. He came out of the water, then heaven was opened, and a voice was heard from heaven: this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Why was the heaven opened at that time? Why did the Father say, this is my beloved Son? Because of the symbol of baptism that He obeyed at that time. What is the symbol of baptism? Baptism, meaning is written very clearly in Romans chapter 6, verse 3 to 5. When we are baptized, we identify with the death of Christ. We identify with the burial of Christ. And we identify with the resurrection of Christ. So when Jesus was baptized in the river Jordan, He was declaring, I am willing to die. I am willing to be buried. And I will be risen again from the dead. For the salvation of man, this is necessary. That is the gospel. The gospel in a condensed way is written in 1 Corinthians 15, the first few verses. This is the gospel that I have preached to you, that Jesus should be crucified, was buried, and rose again from the dead. So, in baptism, when he declared what he was going to do on the cross of Calvary, paying the penalty for our sin, to be buried and to be risen from the dead, heaven rejoiced. What is the second time when heaven was open? When Jesus was on the Mount of Transfiguration, Mount Hermon. There we find he was transfigured, brighter than the brightest sun. And then you know the whole story, and I don't have time to explain all that. Somehow I have to cover this whole chapter. Because of that, I won't go into that. But heaven was open, and a voice was heard from heaven, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him." Why was that voice heard? Because on the Mount Hermon and in the Transfiguration, Moses and Elijah came. What was their discussion? Their discussion was about the crucifixion, about the death of Christ on the cross of Calvary. And so at that time, when he confirmed himself, that is Jesus Christ, that I am going to die and be buried and be risen from the dead, I will not go back. He set his face to Jerusalem. His attention was focused. Satan could not dissuade him. Peter could not bring him back. And so when he was determined, the Father, knowing that, what did he say? "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." What am I aiming to say, brethren? It's so simple. Whatever you do, whatever sufferings, whatever adaptation and adjustments, whatever lifestyle you do sacrificially for the salvation of people is what pleases man. It may be your sacrificial giving. It may be you are going to witness somewhere. Anything that you do in witnessing for the Lord, trying to redeem people, pleases God. Therefore, our duty, of course, is to worship on a Sunday morning. It pleases God, I agree. But remember, if we do not witness for the Lord, it is high time to think, is my God pleased about me? He kept us in this world not only to worship but to be witnesses. Maybe by distributing tracts, maybe by knocking at the door of people, and maybe speaking to someone your testimony. And so that is what we find. There I stop that point. The pleasure of my God. Whenever I think about witnessing for the Lord, I know that it is pleasing to Him. When I walk on the mountains, I know I am pleasing Him. Whenever I do anything sacrificially, I know. Because I, as a soldier of Jesus Christ, my desire should be to please Him who recruited me into His army, who enabled me. That is what Paul says in 2 Timothy chapter 2. A soldier's desire is to please the one who has appointed him. Number 3, verse 10. In verse 10 it says, we must all appear before the judgment seat of Jesus Christ. About the different judgment seats in the Bible, we have no time to study. But the judgment seat of Jesus Christ, which is called Bema, in the New Testament, is exclusively for believers. This is at the rapture. That is where all the believers will stand before Him. And we find that also in several other Bible verses. Romans chapter 14 and verse 10. Romans 14 and verse 10. We will all stand before the judgment seat of Jesus Christ. And the same thing is explained in several other verses, including Corinthian letter, where there we find chapter 3 verse 11 to 15. There we find when we stand before Him, all what we have done, if it is like silver, gold and precious stone, you will be rewarded. But if they are like wood, hay and stubble, they will be burned by fire. What does it mean? Our work will be rewarded not according to the quantity, but according to the quality. Wood, hay and stubble, they are voluminous, they are very big, but they are not very costly. When you go to the rice fields in Texas, you see a lot of this hay heaped together, but they are not that costly. But you take a small piece of gold or silver or precious stone, that worth millions. And so, when we stand before the judgment seat of Christ, it is not the quantity of our work that the Lord is looking, but our motive, our heart. With what intention have we done the service of the Lord? One time Jesus said to His disciple, what spirit do you have? Here, Luke chapter 9. What spirit do you have? You can do good work in the wrong spirit. You can do good works in the wrong spirit. You can worship in competition. You can go to church in competition, not in the right spirit. Therefore, we have to examine our life and find whether we are doing the work of the Lord in the right spirit. That is quality. One of my good friends, who is gone to be with the Lord, who was a great preacher and a hymn writer, his name is Brother M.E. Cherian. He told the story very well about this. A hen want to lay egg. Suppose a hen want to lay egg, if you have a hen. And if that hen is Brother Robbie's house and want to lay egg, then what would happen? It will go around the house many times making big noise, and not only Brother John Landis will hear that, but other neighbors also will hear. And they will talk among themselves, says, Robbie has got a hen, it is going to lay egg. After some time, quietly sitting some time, this hen laid one egg. I don't know the price of one egg here. It may be not very costly. Will it become $1 for an egg? Few cents? Few cents only. But after laying that egg, the hen will fly out, and the whole area, is that your Glen Allen area? No.
Mechanicsville.
Eh?
Mechanicsville.
Mechanicsville area will hear, and they will say, Brother Robbie's hen laid one egg, but the cost is only a quarter. But suppose there is an elephant that goes and having a childbirth far in the jungle, quietly, nobody knows, An elephant, baby elephant is born. Thousands of dollars and nobody knows it. Your giving, your going, your life should not be like hen laying eggs. It should be for God's glory, secretly. What your right hand does, left hand should not know. But people are so expert in propaganda business in Christianity. 5 souls are saved, 50 souls are saved, they say. Of course, what happened in India many times, preachers come from other countries. They go to Calcutta, they go to Bombay, and when they come back here, they report. We had been to Calcutta. 50,000 people were gathering. And you know what? 5,000 people were saved. But then what really happened is, maybe 5,000 people gathered, and maybe 50 people accepted Christ. But 0 has no value for the statistics when they come back reporting for raising funds. So that should not be. That should not be. We should not make any propaganda. Peter wanted a publicity. So that is written in Matthew chapter 19. What was the publicity he wanted? Recognition. Master, we have left everything and followed you. What are we going to get? And I used to think like this. What did Peter leave after all? He left only a second-hand net and a mother-in-law. That's all. He left only a second-hand net. Because when Jesus called, he was mending the net. That means his net was not new. Right? When we leave something for the Lord, resigning a job, it may be a teacher's job, as I did, or some other things, we make a big publicity. What have you left? Only second-hand things. But God in turn is going to give us great reward. I can speak about this subject for a week, about reward when we meet the Lord face to face. But I must go on. But when we talk about this reward at His coming, that is the point I am dealing with. Reward at His coming. We are all going to be rewarded. There are 3 kinds of rewards. The brightness, the thrones, and the crowns. Brightness, thrones, and crowns. We read about 5 crowns. We will not explain today. We talk about brightness. There is a brightness of the sun, of the moon, and the stars. One star is different than the other. And on the day of glorification, we are going to shine like that. Who is going to shine more and less? We have no time to tell. But we are going to shine. Not only that, thrones. We are going to rule. Personally, I believe, I was talking with Brother John Landis today. God did not create all these planets, galaxies for nothing. We are going to rule. This is only a ground where He is sowing the seed, and this will multiply. And eternity, what is going to happen? We are going to occupy those places. The nations of the earth will bring their glory unto it. And we will reign with the Lord forever. I know these are eschatological or theological terms, so I will not explain today. But I will hasten to the next one. Next one is verse 11. Knowing therefore the terror of the Lord, we persuade men. That motivates me to be a witness. I cannot slow down. Why? Because I know it is appointed for every man once to die, and after that the judgment. I know that. I know there is going to be an eternal hell. I know there is going to be eternal fire. I know there is going to be an eternal darkness. And I know that there is an eternal bottomless pit. Some people say Bible is a book of contradiction. Because it says fire. At the same time, it is a place of darkness. How can there be fire? How can there be darkness? Some people say it is called a lake of fire. Then some people say, Bible says that, lake of fire. So they question that. It is called a lake of fire. Then says again, bottomless pit, outer darkness. How can all this work together? The hell is prepared by God in such a way. It will be a place of thickest darkness, and at the same time, it will be a place of liquid fire. Bottomless pit means after a man dies, a sinner, of course his soul is going to Hades. In Old Testament it was called Sheol. In the New Testament we find the Hades. Rich man and Lazarus story, we know that. Then what happened? When he is promoted at the white throne judgment, he is promoted from the Hades to hellfire. What is the difference? In the Hades, he was suffering only with his soul. But in hell, he is going to suffer with his body. In both places, there is memory, there is pain. Then somebody say like this, oh, how can there be pain in the Hades? How can there be severe pain? Those of you who are familiar with the medical terms, there is a medical term called phantom pain. What is phantom pain? Suppose you met with an accident in a vehicle. Your hand is gone at the elbow. But when you are in the hospital, you will be crying, oh, my fingers are paining. My thumb is hurting. But you don't have them, right? This is called phantom pain. And if that is so, when a man is going to hell, even without body, he will have that phantom pain forever. But God is going to give him a body. When? At the white throne judgment. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Some people believe in annihilation. That means there is no eternal hell. Sinner will be consumed, completely gone. They will be burned. Not like that. There will be fire, but a sinner will be in the eternal fire, in torment, forever and ever. Then some people say, how can there be weeping and gnashing of teeth in hell? I think it was D.L. Moody, that great preacher, one day was preaching about hell and said, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth in hell. But there was an elderly man sitting at the back pew in his 80s. He had no teeth in his mouth. So he has a problem. He stood up and said, preacher, you said that weeping and gnashing of teeth in hell, but what about people without teeth? D.L. Moody said, Father, please don't worry about that now. At your resurrection, the Lord is going to raise you with strong body and 32 strong teeth for gnash forever and ever. Why a person will be put to hell along with their body? Because man did not commit sin with his soul only. He used his body as instrument of sin. In this way also we can go on. But my point here is that these thoughts make me motivated to win souls. People are going to hellfire. I must pull them out of the hellfire. If you really believe in literal hell, eternal hellfire and judgment, we will be witnesses for God. That is what motivates me. When I see a man with a smiling face, living in a mansion, in a bungalow, having all the riches of this world, I think of that person. He is going to suffer for eternity. So don't be misled but by the seeming enjoyment, entertainments that the people are in. But let us think about their precious souls. Verse 14, that is number 5. Verse 14, the love of Christ constrains me. Love of Christ. The next 4 points I must finish within 10 minutes. And I will do like this. Love of Christ constrains me. That constrain, the word meaning is narrows me down. My vision narrowed down. Just like a horse, when it goes, the man does not want the horse to be distracted by the things around. So there will be 2 flaps on both sides. They call it blinders or blinkers. So he can look only to straight. That is the meaning. Love of Christ. Keep me going on in the straight line. Looking to Jesus. Having his mind. Constrains me. Persuades me. I remember the story of David Livingstone. He went to Africa. He lived there many years. After about 14 years, from England, the Queen of England sent a close friend of David Livingstone in search of him and wanted him to come back to England. I think his name was Stanley. And so he went and found David Livingstone living in a humble hut. And he was having ill health. And Stanley said, "My friend, the Queen wants to see you. Please come back. You have done enough in this land." But he could not persuade him to go back. He said, "Please go and tell my Queen I love her. I want to come back. But the love of Christ constrains me to stay." So that is commitment. Love of Christ. It's not my love. It is his love. As a little boy, I thought it is my love that will enable me to go on. If it was my love that will enable me to go on, my love is always fluctuating. Sometimes it is much, sometimes it is less. When we pray also, "Lord, I love you so much." Don't we pray like that? There is nothing wrong in prayer if you are sincere. "I love you so much." But don't depend on that love which is fluctuating. Think about the love of Jesus. He saw me in my need. He came down where I was from the glory of heaven. From Bethlehem to Golgotha, he suffered. In Gethsemane, He fell on the ground. And his sweat began to fall on the ground as great drops of blood. He went to the cross of Calvary. They wanted him to come down. But he loved you and me so much. He hung on to the cross of Calvary. That love. So when you are going to the most difficult places, when you are doing some sacrifices for the Lord and His ministry, think of what He paid. Think of what He did. That is the love of Christ constrained.